The Supreme Court rules 8-1 that President Trump may continue plans to fire federal bureaucrats. New polls show the majority of American voters approve of the mass deportation of illegal immigrants. And assaults on federal law enforcement across California begin anew. I'm Tony Kinnett, host of the Daily Signal's Tony Kinnett Cast, syndicated nationally at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is Wednesday, June 9th, 2025. This is the Daily Signal's top news in 10. Yesterday, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled 8-1 with only Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson dissenting that the Trump administration does in fact have the authority under Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution to direct federal agencies to do things like prepare to downsize. Again, federal employees are individuals who serve at the pleasure of the president. They are executive agencies given such power by the United States Congress and then are backed up by very small clauses in the Constitution, as well as decades and centuries of legal precedent. In this particular lawsuit, the plaintiffs were a lot of federal employees who were represented by a bevy of labor unions. These particular federal employees were comprised of those under 19 federal agencies, including 11 cabinet departments, who sued the Trump administration for this executive order, ordering the executive agencies to plan to consider federal downsizing. Try saying that 3 times fast. The Trump administration argued, of course, that it is entirely within the realm of a president's authority to order executive agencies to prepare plans for eventual downsizing, and the Supreme Court, with the exception of Justice Jackson, wholly agreed with him, including Justices Sotomayor and Kagan, 2 of the other liberal members on the bench. Now, this particular SCOTUS order was very narrow and does allow for further injunctions and some discrepancies depending on how things move forward. But the most notable event from the day is that Justice Sonia Sotomayor, an Obama appointee, clapped back at the dissenting opinion of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. This is the second time in the last couple of weeks that a dissenting opinion by Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was mocked or slammed or just told was flat out ridiculous by the rest of the bench. Sotomayor wrote, quote, "I agree with Justice Jackson that the president cannot restructure federal agencies in a manner inconsistent with congressional mandates. Here, however, the relevant executive order directs agencies to plan reorganizations and reductions in force, quote, consistent with applicable law, end quote. The plans themselves are not before this court at this stage, and thus we have no occasion to consider whether they can and will be carried out consistent with the constraints of law." Essentially, Sotomayor is pointing out that reading is a very good thing if you are a Supreme Court justice. It would be wise to heed these particular pieces of advice from your greatest ally on the bench. As various senators, pundits, representatives, and officials put it rather aptly, it appears that the justice who wasn't able to define what a woman was might be a little unqualified to sit on the bench of the Supreme Court. In other news, while many media pundits are still desperately clinging to the notion that illegal immigration enforcement in this country should be restricted to only going after those who have committed violent crimes, for example, like Jessica Tarlov from Fox News articulated yesterday.
They need to cooperate with ICE to hand over people who have been convicted of something. I'm not talking about crossing the border as something that is convictable. I'm saying that if you commit a crime once you are on U.S. soil, you should be turned over to ICE. And I think that's an easy exchange. And that's what people voted for in November. And you would have a much stronger case against the overreach that we're seeing in terms of what ICE is doing now that is not commensurate with what the American public wants. They didn't vote for people to show up at Home Depots. They didn't vote for people to show up at immigration courts. They didn't vote for the fact that there's new data out from Cato that 65% of the people that ICE has taken into custody have had no convictions.
The majority of Americans simply do not support this. They certainly support going after criminals who are illegal immigrants, but the centrist moderate position in the country, meaning the position that the majority of Americans, not just the majority of one particular party, believes, that all individuals who are illegal immigrants in the United States should be deported, according to just about every single poll of registered voters that's been run. Here's Harry Enton from CNN.
Deport all immigrants who are here illegally, 55% of the New York Times, Marquette 64%, CBS News 57%, ABC News with a slightly different question, 56%. So what you're seeing essentially here is a very clear indication that a majority of Americans, in fact, when they're asked this blunt question, which I believe gets at the underlying feelings, do in fact want to deport all immigrants who are here illegally. There's no arguing with these different numbers because they're all essentially the same across 4 different pollsters.
Despite this, individuals like Stacey Abrams, known for running for office in Georgia and being the president of Earth on a Star Trek series, suggested that sending troops to Los Angeles was an indication that the United States was heading for martial law and the end of voting as we know it.
You send the U.S. Marines into spaces they should not be. You send the National Guard in. You kidnap people off of the streets and pretend that's normal, because that's how you quiet dissent, because you make everyone afraid that if they don't do what you want, they might be next. And once you've done those 9 steps, step 10 is easy. That's when you decide there won't be new elections, because everyone's either afraid, poor, broken, or complicit.
An immigration customs enforcement operation in Los Angeles' MacArthur Park drew a lot of criticism, not from the majority of the United States, but from institutions like the Los Angeles Times, CNN, as well as Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles.
Frankly, it is outrageous and un-American that we have federal armed vehicles in our parks when nothing is going on in the parks. It's outrageous and un-American that the federal government seized our state's National Guard. It's outrageous and un-American that we have U.S. Marines who are trained to kill foreign soldiers overseas deployed in our American city.
Since those statements, there have been a series of attacks on federal law enforcement outside of San Francisco immigration courts. As well as striking an officer in the face in San Diego.
He put his hands on me. No, maybe somebody should have communicated. Right? Instead of standing there. Shame! You stood there like an idiot, not replying. And the moment I did something, you're touching her.
Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington has described the actions of interfering with federal law enforcement as inspiring.
Things have been when people encircle courtrooms and refuse to allow ICE agents in. There are all kinds of nonviolent resistance tactics that we have to use. And I've started something called Resistance Lab, Joy. People can sign up at resistancelab.us. It's a training on really the documented, most effective ways to counter democratic backsliding, nonviolent resistance.
In Los Angeles County, 4 were arrested on felony charges after attempting to impede immigration enforcement by creating homemade devices to pop the tires of federal vehicles, including the pictures that you can see on screen if you are watching the Top News in 10 of what appeared to be some type of rubber hose, which nails are shoved through at particular intervals in an attempt to create some type of crude caltrop. Before you go, head down to the description and make sure you're subscribed to the Tony Kinnett Cast. And join us tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, where we dig into the day's news and noteworthy nonsense. I'm Tony Kinnett, and this has been the Daily Signal's Top News in 10. Take care.